that we are recording these phone calls in place of minutes formally. They are posted to the website. We'll talk about that and provide the link here shortly if you're new to the group. But the recording is on, and we will also take questions either verbally or in the chats. We'll be watching those as we go. But I hope everyone had a very happy new year. Welcome back to 2021. I thought it would get a little bit better, but after yesterday's debacle, I'm not sure whether 2021 is going to be any better, but hopefully we'll keep hope and keep our fingers crossed. So with that, I would like to turn it over to the co-chairs, Dr. Gregg and Dr. Kamita, who will walk us through our agenda and slides.
Thank you, Dee Dee, and welcome everybody, and Happy New Year. And I hope everybody is safe and well and has had a good holidays of the year, and particularly staying well during these interesting times. And so welcome to our first session where we dive back into the work of the data usability. So real quick agenda. So thanks everybody for the engagement. And what we'll do is the usual agenda we've been following with the welcome, and then I'll hand it over to Bill, who will go through, review the logistics of the work group. And then we'll dive in with Joe for discussion of some more forming and storming and norming to come up with our priority items for the bulk of the group, and then wrap some structure around how we proceed with our priorities. Is there's no shortage of efforts to dive into. And then we'll close. So, and I just want to acknowledge Dee Dee and Joe and the whole, and Shauna and Hera and the whole Sequoia team for all the heavy lifting and great work here. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Bill.
Great. Thank you, David. And again, I'll offer my welcome into the new year to everybody, and hope that everyone is safe and healthy. And, you know, it's exciting as we move into you know, some positive things with this year with the growing use of the vaccine for COVID-19. Hope gives us all a little bit of hope. But kind of bringing us back to the work, you know, the work group members, we are very blessed with a great breadth and depth of expertise across 187 organizations and 266 participants. We know that it varies from week to week, but we greatly appreciate all the time that each of you puts in. And as you can see, it covers the gamut of all kinds of expertise. So we're very, very fortunate for that level of engagement. Next slide, please. And again, reminding everybody about the meeting and work group logistics. We don't send out emails about this information, but all of the schedule, the calendar downloads, all of the notes are available from that one site that's marked there, and it gives you full access to everything, including the links to the documents that we'll be talking about later. So you should be able to go at any time and get access to that information. All right, next slide. And again, you know, echoing what David said, you know, greatly appreciate the sponsorship of the Sequoia Project team and all of the members that fund the Sequoia Project. And you can see the growing membership here. Everyone on here is making all of this work possible. And you know, I think that's what's exciting to me, is as I see more and more groups coming together to a common purpose. It doesn't mean that it's easy. But I feel like we're rowing in the same direction more than at any time in my career. And so, yeah, appreciate all the new Sequoia members as well, listed there at the bottom. And then finally, wanted to say one word, and Dee Dee may want to add to this as well, is just to kind of let everybody know about the 2021 Information Blocking Compliance Bootcamp. This is run by the Sequoia Project and allows for free for members, but then a fee for others as well, to really get some expert advice and understanding of how to comply with the information blocking provisions of the ONC final rule. So it's a really great resource of information and expertise. Anything that you would add, Dee Dee?
The only thing to add is just to remind folks that this is a second. We had such an overwhelming response to the first boot camp that is just wrapped up. And so this one is because there was a demand for more of this. So again, they have office hours as well as information that's put together in kind of a toolkit format who's made available to you as a boot camp member. So again, it's a great place to get information about questions you have from your own organization around the information blocking provisions. So by all means, feel free to go to the link on this page. And Shauna, who's on this call, is actually the program manager leading all of that, working with our staff. So if there are any questions around any of that, feel free to chat those, and we'll make sure to respond.
Great, thank you. So that's all I have. So I'll hand it over to Joe now to move forward with the storming and forming.
All right, thank you. So let's get going. I think the only thing I still need to do is change my screen resolution. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do that very quickly.
Yeah, and
can
I think
you hear me
grab,
okay?
Yes, we can, Joe. And I think you
Okay,
can grab the presenter role when you're ready, I believe.
Great, I will do that. Okay, so while I'm waiting for my screen to come back, what we've been talking about storming and norming and performing and all that, and so basically what we are getting at is we're hoping to kind of move. We're hoping to improve the effectiveness of our time together, I guess is what I would say. And so what I want to do is kind of focus us on, let's talk about how we capture the pain points, the issues, the work items that we're talking about, so that we can make the choice as a group whether or not they're ready for prime time, like if they're ready to prioritize and vote on. And I want everybody to keep that in mind, that really that's the end goal, is when we are starting to build this table of contents, the key bits of information that we need are really around scope. And so it's scope and clarity. And what I've heard and seen both in the written documents, the written issues, as well as what I've heard on the calls, there's a lot of really good information being conveyed. But I would say that there's a lot of it that is, it's either exploring the problem beyond what we need to explore to determine scope, or it's talking about, well, there's this case and there's that case and watch out for that case. But it's not really changing anything about the scope. So I'd like to ask the group to try and focus like a laser on scope issues, and then also, of course, solutioning. It's okay to do a little bit of solutioning, but I'll ask you not to do it so much during these calls. And so I'm going to give you, I'm going to actually show you an example. This is an item that I wrote. I wrote it for the prior work group, and I've spent a little time updating it. And this is kind of the level of detail that I'd like to see. So, we have a its title and yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I not displaying yet?
I'm not seeing anything.
No. That's me. I forgot to hit share. All right. Thank you. Silly me. Okay. All right. So just trying to walk and chew gum at the same time, basically. So here's something like reducing duplicate data. Obviously, this is a big topic, and most of the topics that we're thinking about are big. What I'm trying to do, though, is help us figure out scoping. So, so one thing that I say immediately, we could treat this as a single work item, or we could break it up. And then I mentioned that the low-hanging fruit is where you're a generating system and you know what you're duplicating. And if you're in a position to do something about it, that's relatively straightforward. It might not be no impact, but it's relatively straightforward to document. But then it gets more difficult. Then you move into like human-mediated workflows, so like reconciliation and code matching and that sort of thing. And so here I'm asking the group to be very specific about how far you want to go in scoping this item. And also think about how it affects all three of the use cases that we're considering. Now, beyond that, data duplication lends itself well, I think, to a kind of a problem mitigation view. Maybe other work items, other issues are more like, hey, let's solve this use case. And so you would probably, in that case, you would just document the use case, or you would document use case and a few interesting flows. But in this is more surgical. It's specific pain points. Let's fix this pain point. And so in this case, I've identified some problems, and I tried to tease out what makes these problems different. So I had like the same exact information from one source within the same document, without identifying it as the same. And it turns out that this is already addressed. We've already got this addressed, at least in the joint document content workgroup guide, even though that's not necessarily normative yet for whatever exchange you're involved in. But this has been, the mail has been answered here. But I added this question: do we need to revisit this or clarify this? Because I noticed when we started talking about other cases, it maybe blurs the line. So the requirement, as stated, says for any entry where an ID is required, systems shall maintain consistent IDs across documents. So that actually covers not only this problem, but the next problem as well, which is the same information across different documents. But what we realized, though, is when we asked for how this happens in the wild, the VHIE were kind enough to let us know that it's it can be an issue for HIEs because they're aggregating information from multiple places. And so I actually broke that out to a separate issue because it's kind of different. This problem is where the system knows that it's the same and it can do something about it. And we've had good results in talking with systems about this. We've seen some good uptake of this requirement. So when systems have the same source, like they're generating documents from the same EHR, that we're seeing some success in getting consistent IDs. So that's probably the lowest hanging fruit. But then we have aggregating different sources that have separately captured the same concept. That's a different problem. How do we fix that? And that's right away gets into a much harder situation. And so I just tried to capture, what you do. You can encourage consolidation. You can try and aggregate. The aggregating system can try and deduplicate as much as possible. But we very quickly go into some pretty complex human-mediated workflows. So I've put these here to say, here's an idea, but the group could very simply say, you know what, this problem is too tough. We're going to leave the current state in place, which is that the receiving system just has to cope some way or another. It's not for me to decide how the group wants to decide on prioritizing this. The key here is that I'm trying to give you enough information here and succinctly for you to identify whether or not you think this is worth prioritizing. together or separately with the other stuff. Okay. So I guess you could say in presenting this topic, I'm maybe a little less interested in the topic than I am in the form that we're representing it in. And I'll just mention that you know, Didi and I have been talking about this, and I think we'll be exploring some different formats, and maybe Didi will want to talk about that later in this call. For now, since all we've got is Google Documents, that's my request of you. Since I heard John Murky's voice on this call, I'm going to point out that I've got a problem and a solution that is, I'm going to actually point to his blog for this because it's a good solution. And this is where a system makes the same document content available in multiple flavors. And you can reflect this. The current state that we have seen in the wild is that the generating system negotiates this. They talk about it with partner agreements. It's not very scalable, but you can reflect this explicitly via transformation associations. And so that's a way that you can save the receiver. You can save the poor physician who is looking at, you know, 8 documents and not realizing that 3 of them are the same content without actually cracking them open. You could save them work by making this explicit. So that's an idea. I'd like to see us tackle this one. That's it. So I only wanted to bring this up as an example, unless the group would like to actually talk through this topic, because I don't want to privilege my topic that I wrote down. Any thoughts, questions? Is anybody talking on mute? Okay. I will say that I added a couple of comments for whoever was kind enough from VHIE to add these additions. I really appreciate that, and I think that's how we're going to proceed best, is by people in the group asking and answering questions this way. I have added a couple of comments, so if you want to read those, you can read those and decide whether or not you want to modify your comments or remove them or something. So this was one. The problem that I stated had to do with redisclosure, where a system obtains documents from other systems and rediscloses them. So now you've got 2 systems that you can get the same document from. And then the comment refers to a different problem, which is you ask for, say you ask for an encounter and then you ask for the same encounter the next day and nothing's changed, but the system generates a new document and a new document ID. And we addressed that already in the 2.0 guide. So I've called that out here. And so I'm asking for clarification on this comment. All right, so unless there are any issues with this, what I'd like to do is pull out of this topic and go back to the top, so we can start addressing some of the other group topics. Any questions? All right, good deal. So let's take a look at the overall roadmap. Okay. Do you want me to just drive, or does anybody want to take this opportunity to draw? Oh, I see some chat. Sorry, I wasn't seeing that. Okay. All right, good. So would anybody like to request a particular topic be pulled up first? All right, it's a quiet group today. All right, let's take a look at, I don't know if we've looked at this one. This exchange document should not supports structured content. Maybe we have looked at this. Let's take a look at this one. Whole document narrative. Does anybody want to claim this one? That we could do a little talking?
This is Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay, so Tom Bronken?
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right, so many retrieved documents are difficult to read because they're overly parsed, loaded with unhelpful information. Okay. So yes, I have read this one. Well, I'm going to pause. Let's pause and let the group take a couple minutes to read this. And I'd like the group to think about if it's clear to you, if it's prioritizable, if it's too big for one priority item, if it needs to be broken up.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, Joe. We want to make sure that we have pain points very well defined. And Joe alluded to it a little while ago. One of the things we talked about this week with the co-chairs is that we probably need to design a format where we gather this information in some harmonized or normalized way where we, here's the problem and here's, potential solutions and here's standards that are affected or whatever. So that's something that we're working on. So we'll hopefully take in these Google documents that exist now, we'll probably put some structure around them. We're going to create a straw man for that over the next couple weeks. Our goal in this month is really in January to take and document what are the pain points that we all feel every day as providers, as patients, as public health officials, whatever hat you're wearing. What are the issues when you are exchanging data today that you would like to see somehow addressed? So let's do the storming and norming as Dr. Greg mentioned earlier to gather what all the pain points are. And then starting into probably, doing that for the next couple of weeks between now and the end of January, and then going into February and March, being able to make sure that we understand the pain points and we tease them out so that it could be that there's a workflow issue that actually has two different pain points that are associated with it. Maybe there's not a value set or a code set that everyone is using for something, so that needs to be specified or pointed to because maybe it exists and no one knows about it. And maybe there's something else. Maybe there's another data element that should be gathered or something to that effect. I'm using examples, but we want to really understand concrete pain points that are granular enough that we can actually try to make some effective change in an implementation guide that implementers can follow. That's the goal there.
This is Tom Bronken again. I have to apologize because I'm a lumper, not a splitter. But if you want me to do a specific example, let's talk about the CCD, the Summary of Care document, which is probably the most common document that is exchanged today. And what I'm finding is, I was a CMIO, my physicians say it's a useless document. There's nothing in there that I can find that's any value except for the discrete data elements, which are nice, but I need to know what's going on with the patient, and I cannot determine it from that document. And it's because it's all worked out, as I say, bloated, and pertinent things are not pointed out. So that's a specific example, and it's a very, very common.
So I would ask the question about that, and that is, remember, when we're talking about any document, but especially CCDs, they have a million different purposes and users. And so as they're described, like in the specification, they're often generated automatically by systems, and they're even, so it's not so much that they're telling a story, it's more of a data dump. And so my question for those of you who consume CCDs, let's first off be clear about this. We're not talking about a CCD that is using CCD format, but really should have been an encounter summary, right? We're talking about something that is the patient summary, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is more.
That's a different problem.
We're going to getting to those, so that's exactly why I'm bringing this up now. We do not want to duplicate the problems with the CCD.
Okay, so let's give like I'm looking at Lisa Nelson's name. she would probably, I don't know if you're on the call, Lisa, but I would imagine you would give like an anecdote of well, we think of CCDs, a patient summary, as something that you would get for like a transition of care or emergency care or something where you know, it's a new provider maybe that's getting something and wants to know what's happening, like what's happening with a particular condition, what's the big story with this patient, something like that, and they want that information to jump out at them. And if that information is like an allergy they need to know about or comorbidity or something, well, maybe they can just consume it as a bunch of data points and let their data-driven analysis tools at it. But I think you're after the opposite, which is you want a human to read it and get the point, right? So I have a question out to the subject matter experts in CCD, which is what's the role typically of an overall document narrative? Are the sections intended to hang together to convey a big story, like I'm transferring this patient to you because they have advanced stage something? Is that typically used? Is that something that should be used?
So,
And
Joe,
actually,
this
am I
is
going
Lisa.
beyond
I
scope?
absolutely, no, you're absolutely
Okay.
right. The problem is that everybody got so misfocused on CCDs, which is this collection of historical information in 15 different sections. Give me the list of meds, give me the list of vital signs, what encounters have you been, what procedures have you had, which is just like a real quick way of getting a history on a patient when you don't know anything about them. But it's not providing the clinical story of what's been going on with the patient. And when I was heading up the Health Story Project at HIMSS for 5 years, we tried to just drum this in and beat the drum that encounter documents were needed, that in order to understand what's going on with the patient, you need to be able to see the visit summaries and read the story of what's going on. And, you know, I really feel like we kept the lifeline going for narrative during those early days when everybody was just ready to throw everything out and just get discrete data. But I think the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way. The complaints that people have about the documents they're getting right now are leading them back to that same conclusion. I need the narrative. I need to read the story. And yes, we want discrete data so the computers can help us compute, discern, identify things that could be problems. You know, we want that computer assist, but for the humans to make sense of this information, the narrative is really important. And I don't think that the larger community really understood that there were these other document types that if in the beginning you had started right out getting, oh, I got the patient's history and physical, and then as they were seen over 6 months, I got 4 progress notes that showed me how they were progressing, and then before they were discharged, I got another history and physical, and then I got a discharge summary. You know, if you saw the documentation accumulate in that natural progressive way that clinicians want to absorb it, I think everyone would have a really different opinion about CDA documents and their usefulness.
I agree with that up to a point. However, the CDA documents themselves are structured in such a way that it takes the narrative and it parses it again, which then leads to the problems of not being able to know the temporal relationships, which things are more important, which things lead to others. That part of the story is missing when you parse data. But I agree, those are better documents, but I'm not sure that, I mean, what docs like to do is dictate, and what docs like to do is read dictated documents. That tells the story the most efficient way. Now, I'm not saying that we should go to that. I'm just saying that should be a part of it as well as the structured document.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we'd have to say, what do you mean by structured document? With structured document, the way that CDA first got started and the idea of the templates that were invented for consolidated CDA came from looking at thousands of clinical documents that came from the transcription space. And the early analysis went through and said good transcribed documents tend to have these sections of information in them. And that's how they invented those original section LOINC codes, so that you could mimic and automate organization of information the way clinicians were dictating. So the problem is that those narrative sections, they all are intended to have narrative text in them. And you can also have discrete machine processable data, but people got so fixated on just the list of entries that would be in there that they forgot to really worry about, well, how do we keep the story going? What belongs in the history of present illness? What belongs in the reason for visit? Why are we not populating information into these cornerstone, sort of soap note sections that got invented? And it's all still there. That's why I asked, what specifically do you think did you have in mind where we could get some improvement? The capability is there. We just need, I think, someone with the vision who says, I'm a clinician and I want to read documents that are like this. Can you make this? I think we could.
Yeah,
Right. And
Lisa,
one thing to point out. One thing real quickly to point out, I know this has been, quite frankly, for those who've lived this history, the reason we're in this debacle is because, with meaningful use and the EHR adoption incentives and so forth, everyone had to produce one of 3 document types in the end. But at the beginning, in the first meaningful use requirement, they had to do only one type, which was the CCD, because it was kind of the catch-all. But there even at that point in time, in the first 2011 edition of meaningful use, there was only one document type. But when 2014 came around, there were 9. But no one continued to expand on that. They did the bare minimum. So I think that's what we're trying to do, is push the vendors to do more. Now, this joint document content work group, the implementation guide that Care Quality and Commonwealth put out, that they're in the final throes of trying to determine the timelines for which they're going to hold each other accountable in the way of network-to-network communication. They are now requiring that encounter level summary documents also be created. So I think a policy governance has to kind of be put in place, and that's what we're hoping to do, is create an implementation guide that will build off of that. So now that we have the industry agreeing that you don't only need a patient level summary, which is the CCD, which is like everything if you're transferring to a new doctor or you're being referred and they want to see your whole history, rather also include things like referrals or discharge summaries or other types of encounter-based documents. And I think that that's where we would hopefully benefit from your input as to asking what you want to make sure are in those, so that we can then go back to those document types and say, okay, yes, those sections exist, or no, that section doesn't exist, or maybe we need to tweak it somewhat. Maybe you want some additional information the section, that's already in the specification can't handle. So I think that's the kind of stuff that we're really looking for input on. I know all of you are saying, well, I don't see it today. Well, unfortunately, until somebody forces, and I have an old dusty vendor hat, having been a vendor for 16 years, way back in the day, they're going to do what they minimally have to do. So I think it's a matter of making sure we have a carrot and a stick issue to help push it. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody a moment ago.
Well, I want to say just that I took a couple of notes, and what I'm hearing is that I appreciate, Lisa, I appreciate your input, that there's been a lot of thought put into the construction of these document templates and how to best use them. And I think from a scope perspective, what it might be good to do is to say, all right, if the general problem, if the high level goal is that narrative goodness is getting lost, then let's identify scope items that say, well, where is it getting lost the worst? Is it getting lost because systems are only generating CCDs and they're not generating the right kind of document where there are more appropriate narrative locations? Is it that they're just not including narrative information? Because we actually covered a lot of that in previous versions of the joint content work group. There's a lot of guidance about how to attach clinical notes. So is the issue that the standards are there and they say how to do the narrative the right way and people are not doing those? Or are the standards incomplete? That's a scope issue. So we can say, well, we're going to take on the scope issue where there's a gap in how the referral note is specified. That's a scope issue, right? Or we're going to take on we're going to take on the scope of there's just not adequate governance. The standards are all in place, but people are they're unclear about it, or they're just not doing it and they won't do it unless they're compelled. So
I think it's a combination of not doing it unless they're compelled and not realizing that it's there. I had an experience just before Christmas. Dr. Jim Grew, who is pretty prolific talking out in the industry in the ophthalmology space, was doing a presentation at Direct Trust, and he needed help, showing something for 360X to make a referral note. And so we talked through the use case and stuff, and I made him a referral note, and he's like, oh my God, I've never seen a CDA document like this. This is amazing. I can read it. I can understand it. And so he's so jazzed up about it. He's working with another couple of ophthalmologists and an optometrist EHR, and they're putting together a whole story, and we're making CDA documents that tell the story, and really you can read them. And so I think if we had more examples, it would open up people's expectations of what the possibilities are. Either that, or people just come forward with documents that they have in other ways and say, these are good documents. Why can't you make documents like this?
Okay, so let me rephrase, if I may. You gave a really good example document. You showed someone an example and said you could do it this way. Now we know that there's the CDA example task force, CCDA example task force. Was this an example from there? Is it a question where the examples are published but they just didn't know about them, or where the examples that we are publishing need to be better, like need to reflect more goodness? I
think the examples that we publish need to be better. There are very few whole document samples. CDA examples task force take on small problems, and you might get an example entry section, but no one is saying, here's a human story of what's going on, and here's a whole document that matches with that. It's a big undertaking when you do it, manually, to make these demonstration documents like this. But we need to get a few at least so people can start to see the possibilities. And I didn't do anything different, Joe, than what the implementation guide already tells us we can do. It's a referral note. We use the required sections are all there. The optional sections are also used. It's just exploring the possibilities.
So, Lisa, I just want to jump in for a second. This is Dr. Miller. I really strongly agree with what's being said, particularly what Lisa is saying. That being said, I think part of this that's certainly out of scope is not a technical or a systems problem, but a physician behavior problem. There are physicians that just don't document narrative. They will use the EHR functionality to write a minimum in the SOAP note. So I think that we have to consider that as we look at this problem.
Yeah, I saw your comment in the chat. Joe, I wanted to call your attention to a few of the comments. We have a comment from Tammy G. I don't understand it, so that's why I'm calling it out. It says, what about the SBAR format for issues? Tammy, if you can provide a link so I can get more familiar with the SBAR format, because I'll be honest, I don't know that, but I'm always open to suggestions, and I would love to know more about that. And then Dr. Miller's comment that was that she made verbally as well. Dr. Leftwich also has a comment, so I just wanted to call your attention to that, Joe.
Got it. Thank you.
You just like that there was a bar involved. I'd like to go out to a bar too. That's just not fair.
Okay.
Thank you very much for sending the SBAR toolkit information, Dr. Miller.
So without us diving into this, does this tool tell you you're in this clinical situation, here's what document to use, or here's how to use your tools in the best way? Is it profiles over document types?
SBAR is a way to document. It's typically used by nursing staff.
Oh, I guess I got to register. Okay. All right.
So again,
it looks like it's
the documentation would be, documenting situation, the background of the situation, assessment, and recommendations. Physicians, as I referenced, are trained to use SOAP notes, which is subjective, objective assessment and plan. I think Dee Dee already referenced, or Lisa, some of the sections that go in. For example, chief complaint and history of present illness are in subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Full exam and any tests or studies are in objective, and then the assessment is essentially the diagnoses you're assigning or your thoughts about the patient's diagnoses, and then the plan is what you're ordering or what you are considering to address the diagnoses in a nutshell.
Okay. More oriented to critical care. Is that something that is oriented for critical care? Okay, I'm just looking at the chat. Yeah.
Even in ICUs or critical care, physicians are using SOAP note format.
So Dr. Miller, a question there on the SOAP format. Is there a mapping to CDA and a particular document template that would be used?
That's a Lisa question.
We did in the HIMSS Health Story project, we have a whole presentation on it, and we went through and analyzed all of the various 70 sections that are defined in consolidated CDA and cataloged them according to whether they were carrying a subjective, objective assessment or plan information. And then we made these pictures that basically show you if we're in a consult note, here's the sections that they call for, and I just put them in SOAP order. And progress note, here's the sections they call for, and we color coded it just like that. So there's I have a presentation I can send to Joe in PDF form that you can share.
Yeah, Lisa, would you mind doing that? Because I know the Health Story Project stuff that was out on the HIMSS website's all down now. They've taken all that stuff down.
Yeah, I know. I preserved it from some original notes and reincarnated it. So I'll send it to Joe for sharing.
Thank you so much. If you'll make sure to copy me, I'll make sure to add it to our notes.
Will do, Dee Dee.
Okay, thank you. So scope ideas. One would be we just simply refer to and promote the Health Story Project. Another would be we update it, like whatever artifacts were produced by that project. Maybe they could use another iteration. That would be a different scope issue. It would require people who are interested in this topic to go read it. Read the output.
As Dee Dee said, Joe, they, when HIMSS redid their website, they took all of that stuff down and it's gone now. The recordings and everything are gone. So if there's interest, look at the piece that I send, and if folks have interest around that, I'd be happy to reincarnate. We can pick up where Health Story Project left off and can continue to carry the message forward.
Would you say it's gone, or it's living on someone's machine?
Well, that's what I was about to say, Joe. I'm going to make sure I follow up with, because I've actually brought this topic up to my colleague at HIMSS, who I work with weekly, and he was going to dig, and this was as of December. So let me see. I'll ping him again and find out if they've been able to locate any of those artifacts, because I did mention that to him. If it's gone, where it's not archived someplace where they could actually resurrect it, I'll see if there's any way we can work with Lisa to resurrect it. But I'm hoping we don't have to do a lot of that. Hopefully we can find it.
Yeah, that would be a shame. So maybe resurrect. So okay, so here are some ideas. We're at 15 minutes. Let's see, is it within the scope to consider the SSA use case for SSDI records? I think anything's within scope. Mr. Parker, do you want to talk about that? Marty, do you want to talk about that? Is there something special?
Well, in my name, just a brief, and I, know there's a lot going on. I'm Gary Parker. I'm the director of HIE in Alabama, also the chief ed officer of Medicaid. A lot of data challenges as well. I just bring it up because I saw that you bring in the veterans, and I think that's great. But we're having a lot of challenges connecting as an HIE, as a intermediary between some providers that's applying for their patients for Social Security disability. SSA, of course, allows HIEs to provide those medical records. And we followed, from an HIE standpoint, we're doing the mapping, but we're having a lot of challenges, even with Epic, and particularly with Cerner, though, that the mapping, their systems don't map to the content properly, and we keep having to go back and not so much on the HIE side, but patches for the Millennium system. And the reason I bring it up, you had mentioned that the Commonwealth and Care Equality were working to try to commonize a document for sharing, and I was just curious. Again, that would be a tremendous help for us, only because for HIEs there is a value proposition for that submission for those data retrievals. So I was just curious if any of that mapping is that. I don't want to complicate the scope, but I do see where at least we're having a lot of trouble with the SSA data matching from EHR vendors.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to compare that to this issue, which we're talking about, like whole document narrative. I'm trying to figure out how that fits.
If you've ever had a chance to look at the SSA mapping that they provide, there are narratives that are supposed to be part of the CCDA. If it's not, you have to backdoor it with PDFs and things of that sort.
Right.
I just want to, again, I don't want to hold up all the progress that y'all made. I just want to see if that was kind of in line as well, but that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know a little bit about SSA, and I know that they're very enthusiastic about receiving narrative information in the right way. And I'll just say that as I pointed out, the pain point of provide narrative information and provide guidance on how to, like, where to put that in a document, certainly in the form of clinical notes, there's guidance that has been added already. Sometimes there's a lag in systems adopting that guidance. So what I'd like us to do is to kind of take a look at that. Like, for example, you could look in the joint document content guidance, and if there's something that's different that provides better guidance that we could point to or update. There's also guidance in the new companion guide. I forget when the update to that came out, but there's a CCDA companion guide. It's got some guidance on clinical notes. So we want to find scope items. We want to find work items to change current state. And so maybe it's just that we point to something where someone's already done the work. Maybe it's that we update something where something has been written, but it could be done better. So I think this is a good start, but I think we need to find some actionable work items.
Hey Joe, it's Marty. I'm not going to get into the SSA piece, but I want to touch into kind of what you're getting at is to work items. To me, for many of us here, have been on multiple work groups around content for many, many years now. What's the carrot or stick that, beyond getting these guidelines out and recommendations out, is to implementation and actual use? How are we going to turn that corner? Because that to me has always been the hardest corner to turn. What are our carrots and sticks that we can use here, to actually?
I'll take. Go ahead, Marty. Sorry.
No, go right ahead.
I'll take that question. So, in fact, it was brought up earlier on our co-chair call this week. So, Sequoia, we don't run any, we don't administer specific information for any networks that exist today. But as the recognized coordinating entity, we can help inform those networks that, like Care Quality or Commonwealth, who would have that carrot and stick. So quite frankly, these implementation guides that we're now creating the table of contents for, that will eventually become, implementation guides that we create between April and January of next year, will be the next iteration for hopefully Commonwealth Care Quality to take on. So the role or the goal here is that any governance project, whether it's Care Quality, Commonwealth, Chic, others in the future that are Qualified Health Information Network folks, could hopefully implement with a governance that says, okay, by this date, everyone shall hold each other accountable for it. Because to your point, without that carrot and stick, none of this is useful. I mean, you can create documents out the gazoo, but until somebody forces you to implement it, they're not going to. So we're hoping that this will inform the rolling requirements of things like TEFCA in the future, the Trusted Exchange Framework and Connected Agreement, which is a governance framework, Care Quality's Care Connected Agreement, the CCA, the Commonwealth Connected Agreements that they have, or other such bodies. So we're hoping that if we do it under the Sequoia umbrella, and we've convened this group, neutrally with third party, with everyone kind of providing input transparently, that others can then join here, fix the next iteration, so version 2.0 of that joint document content work group implementation guide that exists today, that's getting ready to be put into effect, hopefully within 18 months, which is about the time we'll be publishing a new guide here, that people could then take on and hopefully incorporate into their next cycle of, here's how I'm raising the bar. Does that help?
Sort of. I'm just still concerned because many of us have gone through this kind of process, but haven't seen the wheel spin completely around, to implementation and deployment, and then to the next iteration. It feels like some of this has gone a few times. And as you're saying, yes, being convener, but where are those entities and where's the skin in the game that they have to actually make this happen? Yeah, I mean, gotcha. That's what I'm saying is the use cases I think are pertinent, but where the commitments to, from the vendors, the data holders, to produce this and do this so that, we can actually improve the process. Because frankly, to be honest, I've heard these same questions over and over for years in our history, and it's just, I'm hopeful we can get there. I'm just trying to figure out how do we release that linchpin to, open that up so that we can turn that crank and get these things out in implementation, not just guides.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, unfortunately, we're having to do it in baby steps, not as quick as any of us would like that have been doing this for decades now. but it is something that I'm hoping some of that linchpin will start moving the momentum with ONC helping support, the U.S. core data for interoperability, focusing on specific data, classes and data elements themselves, in addition to these guides that give concrete ways of doing it. Because I think that's the, FHIR, whether it's FHIR resources, and remember, this data usability work group is any kind of data, and it doesn't matter how it's being exported, transported, etc. So we want to look at specific data and making sure to make it usable so that it's packaged appropriately in whatever transport mechanism. But I think that baby step, I'll be really honest and blunt, whatever these implementation guides that we put together between now and early next year will be the next generation that we will be socializing with those implementers, to your point, the folks that will actually deploy it. So the fruits of this labor that we're putting together now, we're just at the early stages of it, won't start being, even considered for adoption until next year, likely. So.
Hey, Dee Dee, I'll be that guy. So I hope you're hinting that the RCE will flex its muscle to nudge the networks to be more prescriptive and more insistent on their participants implementing these guidelines. Is that what you're saying?
I'm implying that because of that role, we'll have the ability to. Now, can we force anything? No, because this is, we are the RCE, and ONC dictates to us. So can I say Sequoia and the RCE does it alone? No. But in collaboration with ONC, we can hopefully start pulling those levers to make things like this more ubiquitous. Because until somebody regulates it, I mean, to be bluntly honest, and you all have seen it, until regulation is put out, nobody does anything to move that needle. So we need to make sure that there's that carrot and stick, but yet also making sure we educate. So all of you that are clinicians on here, helping us, you're our village. We need to communicate, just like Lisa Nelson mentioned earlier. A lot of clinicians don't even understand the depth that systems could go if they actually were just done appropriately, whether it's workflow at the physician level or if it's actually capability of gathering and codifying the data for semantic interoperability. So I think, trying to attack that from both vectors is very important. But yes, we are working and convening and collaborating. So are we going to arm wrangle them by ourselves? No, but it's going to take all of us to, to work together for the greater good.
All right, so that's good. Good feedback. Thanks, Marty. And I'm going to nominate you to. I'm going to volunteer you to identify to write up this as a topic. So we know what most of the tools are. We can write shoulds and shalls in a guide, and then we can encourage the exchanges to adopt that guide. We know that regulation of a floor is a one way to do it. But as you like to say, it's only a floor, it's not a ceiling. And if there's something else that we're missing, maybe we identify that. I don't know if that's something we noodle on these scope calls, but you could certainly put it into one of these Google Docs.
So in wrapping up, just to let everyone know, we want to make sure we get the pain points. So please, if you haven't already familiarized yourself with these Google documents that Joe was showing, the various ones, we just covered one today. We are going to internally as staff start working on a few of those to start putting in questions, putting them into that format I mentioned earlier that's more harmonized into something structured, and hopefully get input and ask the right questions from you guys from a scoping perspective. So please make sure your pain points are identified if you've not already done so. And with that, anything else from the co-chairs as we close up the call? I think Dr. Cometa, you're the one left. Dr. Greg had to leave. All right. he may be multitasking as well. COVID vaccinations has everybody on their toes these days. So thanks so much, everyone, for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful week and weekend, and we will see you same time next week. And please keep your input coming. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry I was on mute. Appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Dr. Gamita.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.